Hi everyone, I'm Kenta from American Hakko, and here we are for another episode of Eye On Hakko. Now in today's episode, we'll be covering the Hakko FT-802 thermal wire stripper. I'll be going over the basic operations of the thermal wire stripper. I'll be addressing some of the common questions that we've received in the past about the FT-802, and I'll be giving a quick demo in the process. So, don't go anywhere. All right, welcome back. Now let's get right into talking about the thermal wire stripper, the FT-802. Before I jump right into how to use the product, let me just give a brief explanation on a thermal wire stripper. What's the difference between a regular traditional type of wire stripper, and who are the type of customers or end users who are in need to use such a tool like a thermal wire stripper. So, regular wire stripper looks something like this. A lot of you may have one lying around at your home or in your garage. These are shears. They cut into the insulation, right, with the blade themselves. This one is a CHP CSP 30-7, for example. It covers a range of 16 gauge all the way down to 26 gauge. And like I said, it's a blade and it cuts into the insulation to strip the insulation off the wire. Now, a thermal wire stripper, on the other hand, like the name may suggest, thermal. So it uses heat. It uses the heat to actually melt the insulation so that you can gently strip away the insulation from off of the wires themselves. Okay? So that's the difference. One uses heat to melt the insulation, the other uses the blade to cut into the insulation to strip off the insulation. So that's the difference, that's the big difference. Now, who are the type of customers who use a thermal wire stripper? We have all sorts of numerous customers in different industries. Industries like in the medical industry, space and aerospace, also in the military and defense industries who use the FT-802 type of thermal wire stripper. Now that's because those customers, when in those specific industries, they need to adhere to a stricter standards or stricter regulations, where they cannot risk the potential to nick or any kind of nicks or scrapes or damages to the inner wires or the inner strands or the inner conductors of the wires themselves. They can't use a traditional type of blade type of cutting type of wire stripper. They need to use the heat from a thermal wire stripper so that it only gently melts the insulation to separate it, not causing any kind of nicks or damages to the inner strands, and to from there gently remove the insulation from off of the wire. So that's the difference between the two. Those are the type of customers that use the thermal wire stripper. I'll give a quick demo later on in the show, so stick around. But let me get into the thermal wire stripper themselves a little bit more. These types of tools, the thermal wire stripper tools, it's not anything new. They've been around for a very long time. When it comes to FT-802, it's not Hakko's very first thermal wire stripper that we've developed. We've actually developed our very first thermal wire stripper back maybe 15, close to 20 years ago now. It started off out with a product called the FT-800, and a few years after that, that FT-800 evolved into the product called the FT-801. And from the FT-801, it evolved to our current model, which is called the FT-802, which is the model that I have in front of me. Now this particular product, the FT-802, we released it back in 2018. So it's been out in the market for about 3 years now, and it's very well received by the various end user customers in the various industries that I described earlier. So that's the little bit of history behind the thermal wire stripper, the differences. Now let me get into using the thermal wire stripper. There's, remember, two important points, shall I say, that you should know when working with a thermal wire stripper. And one is you should always know what gauge wire you are working with. The other point you should know is the type of material that you're working with. The insulation material, rather, so to speak. And those are for various reasons. One, you should know the gauge of the wire, because depending on the gauge of wire you're working with, you need to select the proper blade on the thermal wire stripper. For example, the FT-802, the handpiece is called the FT8004, and the blades that you can attach to the FT8004, there's 3 different types of blades. One is called the G4-1601, which is a straight blade. And the other 2 are notched versions. One is called the G4-1602, which covers a range of 18 to 28 gauge wire. And there's another version of the notch blade called the G4-1603, which covers a range from 26 all the way down to a 38 gauge wire. So, like I said, know the gauge of the wire, and depending on the gauge of the wire that you're working with, you need to select the proper blade that you're going to be using on the FT-802. So that's very important for you to know. Now, the other important factor to know, like I said, is the material of the insulation, because not all materials are made equally. Depending on the type, different materials, you have to change your settings accordingly. Some materials may be sufficient at 10%. Other materials like Teflon may be a lot more difficult to melt. You need to raise up their setting to 55 or higher. So again, important to know the gauge and important to know the material of the insulation. So once you've figured out what gauge wire you're dealing with, now you can select the blade that you'll be using on your thermal wire stripper, like I said. So say you're working on a, 20 gauge wire, for example. You should be selecting the G4-1602 blade. And once you figure that out, you're gonna have to insert that, attach that to your handpiece, right? Now the blade, the FT-802 comes with the handpiece. That's this handpiece right here. So it comes with the station and it comes with a handpiece, but it doesn't include the blades. Blades are sold separately, and that's to allow each one of you to be able to select the proper blade for your application. So here I have the G4-1602s with me, 2 blades, and I'm gonna just show you how to attach them to your handpiece properly. Okay. So obviously there is a left-hand side, and a right-hand side when it comes to the blades. And you want to start off with the handpiece, so you see the logo facing up, right? And then it's real simple. You just grab your blade and insert them all the way into the handpiece. See how that looks? That's all the way inserted. What you don't want to do is, for example, insert your blade this way or this way. You want to make sure the left-hand side goes into the left-hand side. And the other point is, you don't want to do that. That is not in all the way. What you want to do, you see this U-shaped lip that is on the handpiece. You'll see it on both sides. So let me take this off. There's a U-shaped lip on both sides of the handpiece. You want to make sure that U lines up to this U-shaped area of the blade itself. So that means you just insert it all the way in till it goes in all the way like so. What you don't want is anything that looks like that. You see how that lip, U-shaped lip, is not all the way up to the U-shaped section of the handpiece, of the blade, sorry. So that means that the blades are not in all the way. And now, why am I going over this in detail? is because this is actually one of the common questions that we receive here regarding the FT-802. A lot of times, or not a lot of times, but sometimes you will get calls from customers saying that, hey, my FT-802 is not working. The display on the station is displaying HE. So you can see that the HE is popping up on my display here. And that is, once again, because the blades aren't inserted in all the way. It's not making the proper contact, the handpiece and the blade. So all you have to do is just make sure you insert the blades all the way into the handpiece. And then from there, you get your set screws. Maybe insert them in halfway. There's two set screws, one for each side. Insert them halfway, and from here, if you're using the notch ones, what you can do is, let me try to move that further back. There you go. And then I'll align them, align the notches, align the holes, make sure everything's aligned. And then from there, tighten down the set screws once again. Okay, now I know that the alignment is perfect and the notches line up perfectly, like so. Okay, and if I turn the station back on, since my blades are inserted in all the way, that gets rid of the HE error. No more heater error. So that's a common problem, and it's actually a real quick fix. The blades aren't inserted in all the way. Now the other common mistake people will make with that is, you see, when the blades are not inserted in all the way, like they are positioned here, what some people end up doing is, you see where these set screws holes are located? They'll put the screws in and tighten them in at this blade position. And what that does is, you're supposed to be here, but since you're tightening the set screws at a higher location on the blade, what you end up doing is, you're supposed to be tightening down the set screw at this location, right? But since it's higher, you're actually tightening down the set screw at that location. And if you tighten it down too much, what you end up doing is you end up damaging the blades themselves, and the blades may end up breaking in rare cases. So that is a mistake that I've seen people do from time to time. So, and it is a quick fix. You just make sure, like I said, that U-shaped lip matches the shape of that U section right there on the blade. And just make sure that the blades go in all the way. And then from there, you can set in your set screws and tighten both sides down. Let's get into the actual operation. Let me show you a little bit on the operation of the station itself. And before I talk about how to set the settings on the FT-802, let me show you. Okay, so pick up the handpiece. This is the station itself. You can see there's a display, there's an up down button and an enter button. This is the back of the FT-802, and if I tilt the station back a little bit, you'll find the iron handpiece holder, you find the blade removal plate, and on the very back you'll find extra spots for blade storage and also for tool storage as well. You'll also find this lip on the back of the station, and that's where you can use this to hook your fingers and hold onto your station in case you need to take your thermal wire stripper and move it to a different location. So here's another feature on the FT802 station itself, and that's the blade removal mechanism. It's actually built into the station itself, and you'll find it right here. That's the blade removal plate, and how you use it is very simple. Before you use it, you just want to please make sure you remove those individual set screws that are holding the blades in place. We completely remove those, get that out of your way, and place your handpiece and your blade like so in that position. And from there, simply pull on it to remove your blades from your handpiece. Once the blades have been removed from the handpiece, again, you can take your blades and use the extra slots in the back of the station that are meant for extra storage. So that was real easy. That's how you use the blade removal feature on the FT802 station. Now let's talk about how to set your proper settings on the FT802, because again, that's another common question that I've heard in the past. How do I know what setting to set on the FT802? Okay, now that goes back onto my initial point. You have to know the material. You should know the material of the installation that you're working with, right? And based on that material, step one, first thing I would recommend is to use the reference chart that we provide with the FT802. You can find that I have it attached on the side of my station right here. It's a recommended guideline of what setting to use depending on the different common types of insulation material that you'll find on wire and cables. For example, there's PVC, polyvinyl chloride. We recommend starting at setting 10, for example. And then there's polyethylene, PE, also recommended setting of 10. And there's nylon, PA, recommended setting of 20. And then you go down the list, you also find Teflon, PTFE, which we recommend a setting of 55. In cases where, say, you don't know what the type of material is, then in those cases, I'll show you what I do when I don't know what the type of material is on a particular type of installation, wire that I'm working with. So what I do is I always start off at a setting of 50%, okay? 50% is actually the default setting. So that's what I'm gonna start off with, right? 50%. And you can see on the display right now, the display is flashing and it stopped flashing now. When it's flashing, that means it's trying to get to its set point. When it stops flashing and becomes a solid number, then that means it's now reached its set point. So now it's at 50% and I'm ready to use. So I have a few wires here that I can mess around with. Let's go to this camera. Like I said, say I don't know what this particular material is, right? But a lot of the times, by looking on the wires, I can see on this particular wire, it says 22 AWG, right there. So it's a 22 gauge wire. So I know it's the third notch from the bottom. So I'm going to be using that notch and watch what happens. Strip, separate, and at 50%, this is what happens. You see, when I separated the insulation and when I pulled the insulation, you can see there's some stringy insulation material, and you can see that there's this lip or this ring that's being formed on one end of the insulation. That means that the insulation is too hot. It's melting it, and it's supposed to melt, but not that much. It's too hot. That's why you get that ring forming around one end of the installation. So that just tells me that I need to back off on my settings. 50% is too much, right? So I'm gonna go back to my station. I'm at 50%, like you can see. And I wanna back it down. You can change the settings on the FT-802 anywhere from 5% all the way up to 100% in 5% increments. So you can go 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, all the way up to 100%, right? You can even go higher if you go into the parameter settings. But for today's demo purposes, I'm gonna show you how to make your changes. All you have to do, if you wanna make your changes, you see up, down, and enter button. You can press and hold any one of these 3 buttons. It could be the up button, the down button, or the enter button. All right, press and hold. So press and hold down the up button, the display will flash. You press down and hold the down button, the display will flash. Same thing with the enter button. Press and hold the enter button, display will flash. Once you get that display to flash, that means you're now able to make your changes. So now, if you want to go up, you press the up button. If you want to go down, you press the down button. In my case, like I said, the setting of 15% was too hot, so I'm going to go down. I'm going to go down, back it down to 25%. Okay? Hit enter. Again, when it's flashing, that means the station and the blades are trying to get to that particular setting. While it's getting there, I'll also share with everyone this nice tool that I like to use when cleaning off some residue, installation residue that I get when working on the thermal wire stripper. Okay, so this is an example of where you may get some melted insulation material stuck onto the surface of the blades themselves. Maybe because your setting was too hot. But when you get material stuck onto the blade themselves, a good tool to use is this FT-700. All you do is just use the brass wires that are rotating in there. Stick your blades in there. And now because the brushes, they're made of a brass material, they're not abrasive on the blades themselves. And take a look. You get the blades nice and clean. No more insulation material. Now the station's set at 25%, I'm gonna go back to my wire. Okay, here's the wire that I was just using with. Remember, I got that ring at 50%, and then now I backed it down to 25%. Stay there. And this is 22 gauge wire, so again, I'm gonna use that 1, 2, 3rd notch from the bottom. Score. Separate. Oh. Yeah, see that? I'm still getting that, I'll call it a string cheesy type of reaction. I'm still getting that ring around one side, one end of the installation. The setting 25%, I backed it down to 25%, but it's still not the proper setting. It's still running too hot, okay? So, tells me I need to back it down even more. So from 25%, let's back it down to, let's go down to 10, okay? Same way, press and hold, display flashes, bring it down, 20, 15, 10, hit enter, and wait for the display to start flashing. While it's doing that, I'm gonna clean off my blade a little bit to get it ready. Okay, now that the display has stopped flashing, I'm gonna keep those two in place just so we can get a comparison. And I'm gonna go back and at 10%, see what I get. One, two, score. Boom. See that? Nice clean separation between on the insulation, no type of ring like you saw here. It's not too hot, it's cleaning, giving a nice clean melting of the insulation. I know 10% is good. From here, I'll cut that off and I'll try it again just to make sure. Let's see, 1, 2, 3. Score it, twist both sides, separate it. Once you get that separation from here, you just want to be twisting and pulling. That's how you remove the insulation or strip the insulation when using a thermal wire stripper. That's the proper way. What I will not do, or what you shouldn't be doing, is what I call a grip and rip. And I went over this in the previous episode of thermal wire stripping. Is what you don't want to do is grip and just pull along like that. Because what you're doing is you might end up scraping the inner strands as you're doing that. And that defeats the whole purpose of using a thermal wire stripper. What you want to do, the proper technique when using a thermal wire stripper, is to melt, separate, and then from there, twist and remove. I'll do it on another piece of material. There you go. 1, 2, 3. Heat up, twist both ends like so, and then separate it just like that. And then from there, use your fingers to twist and pull off the remaining insulation, giving you a nice strip of the wire itself. So that's how I select the proper setting on the FT-802. Again, I wanted to go over that because that's a common question that I do hear back from my customers. How do I know what's the proper setting? And again, I go back to asking them, so what's the material that you're working with, right? If you're working on a PVC, you could go off of the recommendation chart that we provide. If it's PVC, start off at 10%. If it's PE, polyethylene, also start off at 10%. If you're working on a tougher, more difficult type of material like Teflon, PTFE, start off at 55%. Right? That's the first step, is to know the material and refer them to the recommendation chart. Now, if you don't know what the material is, try the method that I went over, the process that I went over with you just now. Start off at 50%. 50% and see how the insulation reacts. If you get that ring or that stringy, cheesy type of reaction from the insulation, then you know, obvious, it's too hot. So you need to back it down to 25 like I did, and see how that reacts. If it's still too hot, back it down even more. And at the end of the day, we found out that 10% works just right. So if you don't know the material, the insulation, it takes a little bit of more work to find the proper setting, but you can do it. Just a little bit of working through the different settings. Now, say you start off at 50% and it gets you nowhere, it doesn't cut, for example, then you need to go the other way. You need to increase your setting. Maybe go up to 70% or 75% and see how the insulation material reacts. And I can give a quick example of the reverse maybe. Because I do have a different type of material here. This is probably Teflon type of material. I'll bring the camera back in. Right now I have the FT-802 set at 10%, right? So say I didn't know what this material was and I'm working on this. And then I would try to strip this, but nothing, no reaction whatsoever, right? So I have no idea what the material is. Then I would just, like I said, start off at 50%. 50% on the station. Wait till it gets to its setting. And then I'm gonna try it again. So here we go. And twist, score, gently separate, and right. I have this other end here, so maybe I can do another one. Score, separate, and then pull back and remove. Okay, nice clean cut. So again, if you're having trouble figuring out the proper setting to use on your FT-802, maybe you don't know what the material is, start off at 50%. But in most cases, most of the insulation that you'll find on regular standard electronic type wire and cable harness assemblies, you should be able to find that material on the recommended reference chart that we provide. So again, go back to that chart, start off using the recommended settings based off of the chart, and then go up or go down from there, okay? You'll know right away once you score the material if it's too hot. Like I said, you'll get that ring or that lip forming around one end. That means you're too hot. If it's not melting it, you need to go higher. All right, now let me give a quick demo now on how to use the lead adjuster that's on the handpiece itself. I'll work on these 3 strands of wire. I have my settings at 10%, and let me see, this is the lead adjuster, and I'll bring that in. And then I'll give a quick demonstration on how to use this. Touch the lead adjuster, score it, separate, and then remove. That's one. Second one, same procedure. Touch it on the lead adjuster. Score it. Separate. Remove. And one last one. Use a lead adjuster, score, separate, and remove. And what you'll get now, take a look now, let me strand the wires in place. You will get 3 wires using the lead adjuster with the same length, right? Other than that, I showed you guys the FT-700. It's a nice piece of accessory I always keep around when using my thermal wire stripper, because depending on the frequency that I'm using it, I do get insulation residue built up on the blade, so that's a nice accessory to keep around to clean off the surface of the blades themselves. The station itself, I showed you the blade holders, the blade removal tool, how to set the, how to make the changes on your settings, but it has some other features. So on the FT-802 station itself, you'll see these two black plastic pieces. What that is that's actually a spot. It's the handpiece holder. That's what it is. You see that? There's these two plastic pieces, and you see a diagram with the handpiece. That shows you that's where you're supposed to put your handpiece, just like that. And it acts as the handpiece holder, right? And once you've placed the handpiece in the holder, let me move the cord out of the way, you'll see that the display went from 50% to RDY. That means ready, right? So the handpiece is still ready to use. Now, within the station itself, there's a useful feature, the sleep feature that you can use. You can set the sleep time anywhere from immediate sleep all the way up to a 30-minute delay. You can set that time anywhere from 1 minute, 5 minutes, 6 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, up to you, right? Once you place the handpiece in the holder, it'll say ready, it'll start the countdown. I have it set at 1 minute, so after 1 minute, the handpiece will go into sleep. So there it is, SLP, that means sleep. Now the handpiece has gone into sleep mode, and what actually happens in sleep mode is that it'll reduce the setting by 50%, okay? So that's one useful feature that you can use on the FT-802. Just like on our other soldering stations, you use the sleep mode to try to prolong the life of your blades in the case of the FT8004. Try to prolong the life of your G4 blades as much as possible by making use of this sleep mode feature. Once you get into the parameter settings, like you can set the sleep time, you can set the auto shut-off time, you could even set the upper limit on your settings, right? What does that mean? For example, you can set it from 5 to 100%, but there's a feature that you can go into that you can increase the upper limit up to 120%. I don't recommend that right off the bat. You shouldn't have to go that high, but you can, it's there if you go into parameter settings. And there's also a feature in there that you can set the upper limit. You can go up to 100, but you could restrict it so that you could only go up to, say, 70 or 80. You can set that restriction on the station itself. So there's a whole bunch of additional features that you can get into once you get into system parameters. You can take a look at that in the instruction manual or by visiting www.HakkoUSA.com. Type in FT-802 into the search box up top, and it'll take you to the product page, and you can read all about the specs and the product descriptions there. Okay, let me talk about a different accessory that you can also use on the FT-802, and that is the FT8003 Hot Knife. You can use a hot knife on larger types of cable and wire harness assemblies to use the hot knife to cut down and strip away the insulation material. Again, it's called the FT8003. And on the FT8003, there's two types of blades that you can actually use on the 8003. One is called the G3-1601. That blade has a radius tip end with a 15-degree end to it. And the G3-1602 that has a 45-degree cut tip end to it. So those are the two different types of blades that you can use on the FT8003 Hot Knife. Again, that's a separate accessory from the FT8004, a different accessory that you can use on the FT802 thermal wire strip. For today's episode, I just wanted to clarify a couple of points about some common questions that we do get from time to time about the FT802. One is about that heater error, and the other one is about how to figure out the proper settings on the FT802. So I hope I was able to clarify some of those questions up for you guys. And if there's any other questions that you might have on the FT802, feel free to reach back out to me at support@HakkoUSA.com. Or if there's any other products that you like for me to cover on these Eye On Hakko episodes, then just get back to me at support@HakkoUSA.com and we'll cover it in a future episode. That's all I got for today. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode of the thermal wire stripper and the FT-802. Give it a try yourself. And I'll see you next time. Remember, keep your eye on Hakko.